Still as a breeze, a river flowing deep. Don't wanna leave the air you breathe. Living mirrors dreams when I think of you and me. Don't wanna leave the world you see, and I will hold you down if love is still alive. It's all forgiven to my eyes. The tide has turned around. Just listen to the sound. Two hearts beating, beating time. Hey yeah, hey yeah, hey yeah, hey yeah, hey yeah. It's all forgiven to my eyes. Hey yeah, hey yeah, hey yeah, hey yeah, hey yeah. It's all forgiven. You and your wicked ways. You and your wicked ways. You and your wicked ways. Sinner of your touch, I can never feel so much. Don't wanna leave us in between. 'Cause when you lock me in, I'm in for life. Don't care, it's a cruel paradise.
It was 1985. It seems such a long time ago today. It was barely months since I had left the army. One weekend in June, I went with friends to the area of Western Zoyland, which is almost an idiom of the West Country by name. The little towns nearby are just as evocative: Axbridge, Chedzoy, Sutton Mallet, Harptree, Criston, Moorlinch, Catcott, Chiltern Trinity. One can almost see the area without leaving one's bed. Surprisingly, none of these towns and parishes are far from Bristol, which 300 years earlier was the second largest city in England. When I was still a soldier, I travelled every Monday morning about 5 a.m., way up over the Mendips, through small towns like Burrington Combe, where, incidentally, the hymn Rock of Ages was composed while the impossibly named Augustus Toplady sheltered from a storm in a rocky cleft in 1763. Further on, I would drive, watching the clock, as I was often so late that as I entered camp, my driver would be on his way out, tutting as he passed me. So as fast as I could, I'd roar through Blagden and its lakes, and up to Blackdown and East Harptree on the highest parts of the Mendip Hills. The mist would hang like a wraith in the fields, and through it I could see the 4,000-year-old barrows or burial mounds, older than the pyramids, and even more chilling. Near where the barrows lie is a small but haunting crossroad. In Somerset, they used to bury highwaymen and suicides at crossroads to confuse the undead spirit and prevent it from returning to its home and haunting the community. They would pin the recently buried with a wooden stake in the heart to prevent the spirit from wandering. The spirit would linger forever in the unconsecrated earth beside the road. I wonder how many drivers like me felt a dread, just for a moment of passing. If so, perhaps the macabre warning still worked, though most people think of Somerset in terms of cider rather than restless spirits. I was soon to encounter both. The reason I had given up a bright, sunny June weekend to visit Western Zoyland was because 1985 was the tricentennial of the Monmouth Rebellion in 1685. I am not from that part of the world, but I could feel the history crackling through the air when we stopped at the Sedgemoor Inn, close to the battlefield. Inside the pub, the hearthstone around the fire was scored with grooves where swords had been sharpened by the royalist soldiers who were housed in the bar over the night before the battle. It was interesting, but outside the pub was the place to be. I had brought along a girl and cider was on tap. The sun was shining, colour and people were everywhere. It was heaven. Somerset friends had told me that it took until 1977 before a member of the royal family visited Somerset because of bad feelings still lingering after the rebellion and the bloody assizes overseen by the infamous Judge Jeffreys. Today there were no dark shadows or resentment, only jollity. Mid-cider gulp, my hand was grabbed and I was dragged into the group of jingling, jostling Morris dancers. I could have pulled away, but in front of a huge crowd I took the proffered handkerchief and copied the dancers. It was so much fun. I can't remember the details, just a kaleidoscope of laughing people, bells and sticks being cracked together. How long it lasted, I don't know. But I felt like a child must feel at play when memory and fate are delightfully absent. After a few ciders later, we all trekked to the battlefield itself, where the sealed knot were reenacting the fight between Monmouth's men and the King's men. The rebellion itself had its roots in old fears and old loyalties. The Civil War had come and gone. Cromwell was dead and Charles II restored to the throne. His reign had been extravagant and colourful. But when he died in 1685, there was no legitimate heir. His brother James II inherited the crown, and with it the suspicions of many of his subjects, for James was openly Catholic in a kingdom where memories of religion and civil war were still raw. There was another James. James Scott, Duke of Monmouth, Charles's illegitimate son. Handsome, Protestant and popular, he landed at Lyme Regis, and as he marched through Dorset and Somerset, men flocked to his banner. Cloth workers, miners, farmers, and labourers. Not soldiers, but men willing to become soldiers. Some carried old muskets, others pikes fashioned from farming tools. They believed they were defending England and the Protestant faith, because warrior culture is not really about who wins elections or who is pilloried in the press. It is about what causes people to stake everything, comfort, reputation, even life itself, on beliefs they consider worth defending. Perhaps every age imagines itself to stand upon the edge of civil conflict. In taverns and marketplaces, in pubs and on social media, people speak of betrayal, of lost identities and of enemies within. The names change, the fears remain. 300 years ago, men feared Catholic tyranny and took up arms for a Protestant prince. Today, other fears occupy people's minds. Such feelings are older than Sedgemoor itself. However, in my lifetime, I had never before known a period when so many people spoke openly of civil conflict or felt that the country they have grown up in is changing beyond recognition. Fear itself, like hope, is real enough. The causes for which men fight are often forgotten. Their courage, folly, loyalty and suffering remain easier to recognize. The rebels of Sedgemoor, rather than simply debating, entered the field of conflict. When all was done with the festivities, the battlefield seemed barren, and the wetlands, the Rhines or narrow canals snaking across the land still owned their sovereignty of magical history. Their names, like superstitious charms, were in dusky relief. The Polden Hills hung down over Peasy Farm, and the Black Ditch, and west to Fowler's Plot, and the Langmoor Rhine over which Lord Grey's cavalry sought to escape. Closer, the Bussex Rhine, which blocked the rebels' charge, had disappeared over time, but the sound of the famous regiments could be imagined. The Coldstream and Grenadiers, Dumbarton's Royal Scots, and Trelawney's Foot. The men were long gone. The dead carry away their causes. Only the birds remain. It struck me that dread places like battlefields do not always correspond to the dreadful events they witnessed. In 1982, I visited Belsen concentration camp. The day was warm, birds were singing, and I felt no dread there. The dead lay beneath the large brick-bordered graves, and the world had moved on. Yet a lonely crossroads on the Mendips where suicides and highwaymen had once been pinned beneath unconsecrated earth chilled me for no rational reason. I begin to wonder whether dread belonged not to places but to the relationship between places and memory, or just geography masquerading as nightmare. Or perhaps, dread places are not necessarily where terrible things happened. They are where the imagination catches, because that seems true. The Somme may affect one man deeply and leave another unmoved. Belsen may feel peaceful. A quiet wood where an ambush occurred may unsettle a veteran. Nature is utterly indifferent. Birds sang at Belsen in 1982. They probably sang in 1945. They sang at Sedgemoor the morning after the battle. They sing today above the graves. There's almost something beautiful and humbling in that. The dead carry away their causes. Only the birds remain. Memory belongs to men. Nature remembers nothing. And perhaps that is why dread places are so fascinating. They tell us less about the dead than about ourselves. The barrows above East Harptree frightened me. Belsen did not. Neither response was wrong. Both were true. I don't know why. There are places that carry a scent. An aura maybe because they feel dangerous. A crossroads in Somerset where suicides were buried. The Covenant's prison graveyard in St. Giles in Edinburgh. The barrows above East Harptree seen through the morning mist. They all possess something in common. I do not know whether it is memory, folklore, or imagination, but such places are inhabited. Not by ghosts, perhaps, but by the awareness that others have stood here before us and suffered. Human beings are strange creatures. We build monuments to remember and tell stories to forget. Yet some places refuse to cooperate. They insist on remembering for themselves. After the battle, Monmouth was captured and beheaded in London, and the rebels that survived the fighting faced a brutal and calculated campaign of retribution. Hundreds were slaughtered on the battlefield or summarily executed, while others were subjected to the infamous judicial trials known as the Bloody Assizes. Hundreds were hanged on gibbets in view of local townspeople. If you choose to exercise, walk, or ride a mountain bike in the areas of Axbridge, Cross, Winscombe, or where you may climb up onto the higher ground and find yourself on the razor that runs between Crook's Peak or Chute Shelve. As the daylight fades, you may feel a dread, as I did, and find Shakespeare is a fitting narrator for the strange change in atmosphere. If you stand in that lofty place for too long, light thickens, and the crow makes wing to rooky wood. Good things of day begin to droop and drowse, while night's black agents to their praise do rouse. Local legends talk of the screaming rebels of the slopes. Local hikers and campers near the base of Crook's Peak have reported hearing phantom screams, desperate shouting, and the distant sound of panicked running cutting through the night. Folklore attributes these noises to Monmouth's army fleeing royalist cavalry after the rout at Sedgemoor, or the hanged men of Chute Shelve. Just east of Crook Peak lies Chute Shelve Hill. What is true is that Chute Shelve Hill was an established 17th century site of public execution and gibbeting, because it overlooked the main travel crossroads and the town of Axbridge. Judge Jeffreys explicitly demanded that the tarred body parts of the local rebels be left to swing, rot, and decay in public view. This served as a visual warning to anyone traveling across the Mendip Hills. The specific area on Chute Shelve Hill where these displays occurred became known locally as the Hanging Field. It gained a reputation for being haunted due to the long-standing presence of swinging cages and the sound of gibbeted rebels moving in the wind. Judge Jeffreys' Bloody Assizes punished more than 1,000 rebels. Some 350 convicted of treason were hanged, drawn, and quartered. On the end of our sunny day and cider drinking exploits, as the sun began to sink over the battlefield, the girl and I stood gazing at the rebellion monument and not knowing what else to do. I fucked her right there while she sat on the granite memorial. Perhaps irreverence was part of the excitement. The dead had long since surrendered the battlefield to the living, and youth, being youth, paid little heed to monuments. 40 years later, I smile to think that Monmouth's men, most of them scarcely older than we were, might have understood perfectly. The monument survives, and so does its history, but I wish I could remember the girl.